Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tap Into Magic podcast. That actually, before I start anything, I want to say that name was something that I had to just kind of figure out because I was like, I'm not going to just call this the Enlightening Tutor podcast because that feels way too boring, and I feel like there's so many good names for podcasts. Like, I mean, the one that comes to mind is Dice to Removal. I think is kind of a fun one, and just magic-related stuff. Didn't want to call it like, something stupid like something Enlightening Tutor based. I wanted something more funny, and of course a pun had to be thrown in there because I'm cheesy like that. But I was kind of racking my brain and didn't really know where to go with it, so I asked ChatGPT because that's the age we live in now, and I have gotten quite a few. I think I got like close to 60, and I picked out my top 5 favorites, and I guess more like best and worst. I can't say that they're my favorites, but ones I thought that were pretty good besides Tap Into Magic. So the top 5 best I found here were Decked Out, Spellslingers, the Mana Vault, or alternatively the Mana Crypt, Abracadraft, and the best of the 5, Wrath of Godcast, I think is a really funny one. I like that one a lot. Maybe a little too on the nose for what we're doing here. But then we got the worst one. So I asked it to give me a few different ones. It gave me a bunch using Planeswalker names, not using that. And I was like, hey, give me some that have cards baked into the name because that's fun. So they have Parallel Lives Lore, Spellbinding Spells, which is just stupid redundant. Just straight up Soren's Vengeance, which is a card. I don't understand that. Fatal Push Podcast, and then the one that, honestly, I'm teetering between best and worst. It's Goblin Gathering, which is really funny. I really like that. It's also a real Magic card. One of my favorites, just because I'm like, that seems so memey, but it's a little too memey. I think Tap Into Magic is probably the best one out of those, and I couldn't be bothered to try to come up with my name myself, and I actually tried, but I'm bad at deciding things, so here we are. Here's the podcast. Oh, and I guess I've been on such a tangent with that I didn't even talk about what this is and what I'm going to be doing here. So if you don't know already and you found me some other way, you could call me the Enlightening Tutor. That is the YouTube channel that I run. Do a whole bunch of Magic the Gathering content. A lot trying to show people how the game works, show them deck ideas, review decks, review cards, and that kind of thing. Depending on when you're watching this, there may not be a lot of stuff up there, maybe a little bit, because, I don't want to date this video, so I'm not going to go into any specifics, but that's kind of the general ideas. I'm just trying to show people, the wonders of Magic, and I think it's a very cool game, so being able to kind of bring people that sort of joy that I have with the game myself, being able to show people something that, I've loved and have a big passion for, and I've, done for quite a few years now. I find it really enjoyable to, have people experience the same thing I've experienced, or at least guide them towards an experience I think would be very enjoyable. So with all that blabbering done, this podcast is going to be more about my ramblings like I've been doing, and me just kind of talking about, I'm going to have a topic, and just to keep myself sort of focused, but these are kind of going to be more of my long-winded explanations of probably nothing. I'm going to be messing up a lot. If you see any of my videos, those are heavily edited. I have a script. I mess it up a whole bunch of times, cut it together, make it look good. These are going to be basically the opposite. There's not anything on screen. It's just going to be whatever I decide to throw up there, maybe get something on there to make it look sort of interesting. But this is going to be more for the long form content, so I can just kind of talk to you guys without having to feel like, I need a script, I need to put it up, and to give me a better ability to put out more content more easily, because the videos I do on the decks and individual cards take a long time. I'm actually in the process of making one and have been for quite a while. It's just kind of a daunting task to get through them because I want them to be very, very specifically made. I even try to edit out all the breaths I take, so it's very tedious. It's a lot, and I'm not the best at editing. Premiere is still pretty new to me. I don't know anything about it. I'm just kind of jumping in and trying to figure out what's what, trying to get, all the assets to create something, trying to even get music for it has been a little bit of a pain, but figured it out, trying to kind of up my game each time, or at least learn something new with the editing process. So for today, now that I'm actually doing a podcast and not those videos, I've got the top 5 commanders, or my top 5 commanders, favorites, I guess you could say. Just ones that I think are really fun, one that I kind of, I can't say that I identify with, but ones that I definitely find the gameplay and the central mechanics of the most interesting to me. And you're going to find a very easy theme, and I'll probably talk about it more at the end, but there's a theme between these commanders, which is very easy to pick out if you played the game at all, or if you know what these commanders do a lot of. But I just thought it'd be kind of fun to start off here because this is a pretty easy one for me, and, kind of gives you guys an easy way to see my mindset when it comes to Magic and, the sort of games and gameplay I enjoy with it. Of course, this is Commander. This is probably going to be all Commander. I don't really play anything else. I did once upon a time play Standard. I think I started a long time. I think it was Origins had just come out, or M15, or not M15. Was it technically M15 or M16? I don't know what they called it. It was basically a core set. It was Magic Origins. And that's about where I started. Shadows of Innistrad was also a big one there. The Battle for Zendikar, all that crap. I just remember being in Standard at the very least. I don't know if I started at the very beginning. I just remember my first thing being some sort of the Origins Fat Pack bundle, whatever you want to call it. And that was really fun, but I kind of got my butt whooped because I was all younger, didn't know anything about the game, didn't really, have money to spend on anything. And honestly, once I found Commander, I realized that I enjoy more of the social aspect of the game and not really the sitting there, I win, which is another kind of core fundamental of the way I design decks and the way I like to play them. I do like high-powered decks. That's not to say I wouldn't even play competitively. I do like competitive Commander or CDH or whatever you want to call it as well, but I am more on the side of, hey, I just want to sit down, learn about the people I'm playing with, or just talk to them rather than focus on the game entirely. So, I guess enough blabbing about whatever. Let's get into my top commanders. And so number 1 here, or I guess I should say number 5, and also they are technically ordered. I'm going to go kind of least favorite to most favorite. Take it with a grain of salt. These aren't in a crazy order, just what I was like, I kind of like them a little bit more, I guess. And this actually was kind of a hard list to put together because I do have quite a few Commander decks, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think they're my favorite or I like the design or concept of most. Like, I have the Ur-Dragon, and that's not on this list. Spoiler, I don't know if that matters, but it's a very fun commander. I really like dragons. I really like tribal, and those were things I wanted to explore, but I can't say it's my favorite just because it can be, I can't say a boring commander, but there aren't the same design elements that I enjoy in that commander comparatively to these. So there's certain decks I get more joy out of other than others. I really like my Ur-Dragon deck. I think it's really fun. I like the high power of it. I like running giant dragons. That's the whole point. But it's the design philosophy is more what I'm talking about here, and just what I enjoy more seeing within cards. I still like the Ur-Dragon, think it's fun, but it's not my favorite design philosophy. So number 5 we have here is Maria, Scholar of Antiquity. So this is I believe, Brothers War? No. It's Dominaria United, I'm pretty sure. I don't have the cards in front of me. I literally just have the name, so I know what the full thing is. And she's a pretty fun one. I probably should have had the cards pulled up. That would have been a good idea. All right. Yeah, Dominaria United was correct. She's a cool one. So she is a legendary creature, of course. She costs a colorless, a red, and a green, so not that high. And she's a 3/3, so 3 for 3. Got the sort of standard baseline for that. And she says you can untap and tap an untapped non-token artifact you control and add green, which is really cool. That ties into most of what the deck does, but you can also tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control and exile the top card of your library, and you may play it this turn. So she's kind of a lot of things. For one, she's in Gruul, red and green, and she's artifacts matter, which is kind of a weird one to see in Gruul. You don't see that very often. It's usually, mono blue, mono black, a lot of red as well, but not really green. Like, you even see more, I feel like white you almost see more than green artifacts. It's kind of weird, but it's very fun. I like having that color combination, and I have a lot of artifact decks. Artifacts, I think, are probably my favorite card type, just because I feel like they do a lot of fun things, and I like... Mostly, I'm a huge into mana ramping, as you'll see with my top pick. I don't know if, that's a clue into what it is, but I really enjoy being able to get mana fast and to have a lot of value out of the things you cast more than just what they do on their own. So this is a big part of it. And so a lot of what this deck is centered around, because any artifacts you control, and that's another thing I should say beforehand, is she specifies non-token, so she isn't that broken. She's actually, I think, she's, what I'm looking at here, 18 cents for her base version. I think her most expensive, if you got the foil promo, is $220. So she's not expensive at all. She's a really easy budget commander, even, within the 99. You could build her sort of expensive. I can't imagine what a top end deck with her would look like, but she specifies non-token, which means all your treasure creators, like if you have a Gnawbone or Ancient Copper or any of the treasure synergies, or even like Academy Manufacturer creating clues and food and whatever, all of that doesn't really matter for her. So she's got less support than she could have, but honestly, I think she definitely needs to stay the way she is, or else she'd be insanely broken. I think the balance is there, and even having that specific text to restrict her, I think doesn't really make her, it makes her worse in a way, I guess you could say, but I think it is enough. She's still strong in her own right. I've played many games with her, and honestly, I've done pretty well in them, at least when I can get her to go off, because she's kind of random, as what their second ability does. But basically the whole point of this deck is you run a sort of tribe, I guess you could call it. The whole deck archetype is Cheerios, which, if you don't know, that literally means 0 cost cards. So there are a lot of artifacts that cost 0, and it's called Cheerios because that's what it looks like. Pretty dumb, I know. I was about to look up what the Cheerios meant, and then it clicked for me as soon as I thought about it a little harder. But you basically run like a Quarter Shield, Zuran Orb, Ornithopter, what is the Phyrexian Walker, like all of the 0 drops that, it doesn't really matter what they do, because for you, they're just tapping for colorless mana. And I've run a bunch of 1 and 2 drops too, just because there's only so many 0 drops. And actually, some of them are more expensive than others. She's very, very budget. I think the only reason she's worth anything for me is a few cards like Hellkite Tyrant. And I think I also just had an extra, I have an Unfinity Stomping Grounds in here, a regular one, and that raises the price by quite a lot because, it's a special art Shockland. But if you take out the lands, which is, a good portion of it, it's not as expensive, especially if you take out some of even the creatures. There's not a lot of creatures in here. If I look at it right now, I have it pulled up on my phone. There's actually 38 artifacts and actually 20 creatures. I'm kind of surprised, but most of them are artifacts as well. I didn't really think about that. And then a few of extras, but yeah, besides like the Birds of Paradise, the Hellkite Tyrant, and I guess I have a Pathrazer of Ulamog in there for some reason. I don't know why. It's an 11 drop and it doesn't synergize with anything. I just think it was big, so I was like, cool, I'll put it in here. But that is also a downfall of the deck. If you try to exile something and you don't have the mana for it, that can be kind of bad. So playing as low cost as possible is what you want to see. But yeah, basically you're just trying to get as many artifacts out as possible. I think there's only I have 26 lands in here, which is not a lot for Commander, but honestly, the number for this deck is 3. Once you get 3, you can have Mary out, and then whatever else kind of goes with it. But she's extremely fun. I do enjoy the sort of randomness you get with her, because you have all these 0 drops, you keep getting 0 drops, and then you can tap your artifacts, exile the top, and play it. And play means you can also get lands off of it, which is really cool as well. So it has that sort of ability to it, gets that extra value out of it. I like the sort of impulse card advantage, which is really fun. And then I've got some big spells in here just for the fun of it. Like, let's see, I run the win con of the deck is Crackle with Power. So that is, if you don't know, XXX and 2 red. So it's basically 3, or it's whatever X is divided by 3 is what your actual X cost is going to be. And it does deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. So let's say you put in the 2 red, and then each of the X's is 2, so that'd be 6, so 8. You put in 8 mana to this thing with X equaling 2, and you would get 5 times 2 damage with 10 damage on up to 2 targets, which is honestly not that bad for 8 mana. But really what matters here is when you get up to the bigger stuff. Usually I'm casting this card where X is equaling at least 10. That's usually a good number. And what you really need, at least for Commander, if you're starting with 40 life, I believe is about 8, if I do math right. Yeah, 8. So if you can get X up to 8, which is, I mean, that's still 26 mana, which is actually not that hard to do with this deck with all the mana creation. But if you can get there, you can do 40 damage on up to 40 targets. So that's where it kind of gets out of hand. Or no, not 40 targets, 8 targets, because it's times 5. Yeah, I don't even know how to read my own cards. I kind of just hope they work and no one realizes if I make mistakes. But yeah, so 40 damage on up to 8 targets, which is pretty dang big. That kills everyone. And if you can't kill them, you can basically wipe any board of up to 8 creatures. Most creatures don't get that big unless they have indestructible. So it's kind of like a mini Blasphemous Act in a way. But that's basically the big thing. But the thing with this deck is it can be kind of weak because that's not the only win condition. I talked about Hellkite Tyrant, which it says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control at least 20 artifacts, you win the game. That's a big one, but that's a lot slower because usually you cast him and you have to wait a turn because, you can't really cast before your upkeep. Or maybe flash it in. I do run Vedalken Orrery in here, so you could technically flash it in on your last opponent's end step and get it in, but that's kind of the slower win con, and it does feel bad. Another part of this deck is it definitely needs to be able to see the top card of the library, because if you've got 3 mana open and you're like, okay, I'm going to use 2 of my artifacts, try to get the top, maybe it's a 0-drop, maybe it's a 1-drop, maybe I exile something I needed. And if you hit Crackle with Power way too early on, even if you have a little bit of mana, it still feels bad. I always try to cast it if I have at least 2 mana, so you can at least get it in the graveyard, because I think, run a Bala Jet Recovery is one of them, or Bala Jet, I don't know how to pronounce that one. And then, I thought I run a Regrowth. I don't run Regrowth. That's probably something I should add. Not a lot of recursion in this deck, which is probably my bad. I don't run a lot of, most of my decks are pre-Battlecruisery. The only real interaction I have here, there's a Chaos Warp, a Beast Within, a Kenrith's Transformation, a Decimate, and that's pretty much, besides the Crackle of Power, the only real removal I have in the deck. So it's not a lot of removal. This is basically, I don't try to play it solitaire. It kind of turns into that if I can't get it. I remember I played a game not too long ago at my LGS that was it was an hour game at least, and it came down to me and another guy. He was playing the new Karn that came out with, I guess new is going to date this, but of course it's dated. That just happens. He was playing the new Karn that came out with Aftermath, where he gets bigger, equal to the highest CMC of your biggest artifact. And I was playing this, so 2 artifact decks against each other. It was kind of fun seeing what that did, because I'd never seen it before, and there was actually a lot of cool stuff in the epilogue set, even though it is kind of controversial and kind of sucks in a lot of ways. There is some cool stuff, there's a few gold nuggets in the dirt, but it was me against him, and I kept exiling. I had basically everything on my board, and I was actually at risk of drawing myself out, and it turned out that the card I needed, the Crackled Power, is literally at the bottom of my deck, and that's another thing with this deck, and really for Gruul in general. There are no tutors. The only tutors I have are a 3 Visits, a Nature's Lore, and I do have a Harrow, just because ramp, of course, a little bit at the very least, but man, it gets kind of out of hand. I probably should put a gamble in here, but I like the random element of it, and not having the tutor almost feels more correct, because the whole point is the top decking. But for the top decking, actually, what I run in here is I have, where is it? Sarenth Steelseeker. So artifact ETB, you can look at the top, you can put into graveyard, or if it's a land card, you can reveal, put it into hand. So kind of surveil unless it's a land. That card comes in really handy for trying to look at the top of the deck, and a lot of times you can just get lands out of the way, since you can only play 1 a turn. I don't run any extra land drop things in this deck. And honestly, better than that even, I run a Dragon's Rage Channeler, just because, casting artifacts, you surveil, so it's just slightly different than the Steelseeker. Still a good card, and it's 1 mana cheaper, so throw that out there. It's a really fun deck, and I really enjoy the random element of, okay, what am I going to get off the top is going to be really good, like a Vedalken Orrery said I ran, Unwinding Clock, of course, because that allows me to do a lot more with the mana that I get, and then Blinkmoth Urn, and that's the best part about this deck, and also the worst part for a lot of people is the fact that she can tap artifacts Maria. So stuff like Blinkmoth Urn, which normally at the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, if this is untapped, they would add colorless for each artifact they control. So if a bunch of other people, or if anyone else is playing an artifact deck, it's kind of a symmetrical thing. But because Mary can tap it to use it for mana, you can actually make this a very one-sided sort of ability. And it's really good, of course, for this deck with Blinkmoth Urn, because you get it during a main phase so it doesn't fizzle immediately, and you're basically just using all your artifacts to try to cast more artifacts. So that one's probably one of my favorite artifacts in the deck. I do also run a Howling Mine, which is just, they don't get to draw the extra card, only I do, because if it's tapped, you don't draw an additional card. That's one of them. But one of the things that I definitely see with this deck is it could be extremely stacksy if you made it so. Stuff like Winter Orb. Let me double check. I know they've eroded it a few times. It's 2-mana artifact. As long as it's untapped, players can't untap more than one land during their untap steps, which is pretty dang brutal. So basically at the end of the player before me, their opponent's turn right before your turn, you can just tap the artifact. So it sees itself being tapped. When you go to untap, you get all your stuff back. And honestly, even if Mary gets blown up as you try to tap it, I guess you can't do it as you try to tap it, but if she's even not on the field, the deck doesn't really care about that because it's running so many mana rocks that lands are few and far between for what they really do. It doesn't really matter as much for her. I could probably run a Seedborn Muse. That wouldn't be a bad one, but I just look at the freaking creature count and I need to keep that down a little bit. But then there's a bunch of other stacks pieces that do basically the same thing. Let me look it up. I think Static Orb, yep, that's another one. It's a 3-mana artifact, and as long as it's untapped, players can't untap more than 2 permanents during their untap step, which honestly is almost more brutal if you really look at it, because that's either 2 lands, 2 creatures, 2 whatevers, artifacts, I guess planeswalkers. I don't know why I thought of that immediately. They don't really do that. But 2 permanents. So that is really worse, because if someone's got an army of creatures they're trying to use, unless they got Vigilance, they're basically not untapping. That's a pretty dang bad one. And I could definitely put all these in here because they work extremely well with the deck, but and I've honestly wanted to try stacks at least a little bit. I think I had a few stacks pieces, like Lodestone Golem was in there, and then there was one of the cards that don't allow players to cast, or don't allow cards to enter play from, I think, Graveyard and from Library. So a few cards like that. Oh, Weathered Waystone, Runestone, one of those two. And even then I felt kind of bad about it. That's not really my deal, but I wanted to try it out just to see what it is. But right now I would be the worst stacks player, because I'd be the type of stacks player that gets to a really crappy win con, and if you counter Crackle with Power, great, I'm out of the game. So before I try to put any sort of stacks pieces in, if I'm slowing other people down, I want to be able to speed myself up and get to somewhere that allows me to win a lot faster, because it already can get to a pretty grindy game if I don't get what I need right away. That's where I'd probably add in the tutors and get some stuff in there that would do more. I do remember, I think it was Apex of Power, just because that's a fun one. It's 7 colorless and 3 red, so it's a 10 CMC card, which is pretty big. You exile the top 7 cards of your library, you can play them till end of turn, and if you cast that from your hand, you get to add 10 mana of any one color, which doesn't really synergize with Maria, because if you cast it from exile, when you exile it with her, you don't really get it, but it's just kind of a fun big one. I just like that kind of stuff, and there's so many more I could go into. Like, of course, I have Liberator in there for the flash and that kind of crap, but it's a really fun deck. I had a really fun time making her, and I do actually have a really fun time playing her, and that's kind of how I judged this when making this list, was how giddy do I feel when I'm thinking about, oh, hey, I'm going to play this deck. And then, like I said before, it's not like I don't like my other decks. I like all the decks that I play, that's why I built them, but it's just sort of that child happiness feeling of like, oh, I get to play this deck. I really like this deck. I like what it does. I want to see what it does this time. I like that kind of thing. All right, that was enough about Maria. She's really fun, but I kind of want to get into my next one, which is Nira Wild Mage. And she's actually the kind of odd one out on this list, because I have not built her yet. I have put her together technically on Archidekt just to try her out, because my friend showed it to me, and I was like, wow, she seems really good. So, Nira Wild Mage is a human elf shaman for 4 colorless, a blue and a red, and she's a 2/7, which is kind of a weird stat line. But the big thing here, she costs a lot, so she must do something good, right? And I would say she definitely does. So whenever you cast a spell, you may put it on the bottom of its owner's library. So if you cast something else from someone else, it goes to the bottom of their library, and that's kind of why that's there. And if you do this, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then put all revealed cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in any order. This ability triggers only once each turn. So it's kind of broken. In a lot of different ways, because basically the whole point here is you're playing all the cantrips. You're playing Ponders, you're playing Brainstorms, you're playing all the lower level stuff. You could really play a bunch of zero-cost artifacts if you wanted to. It's kind of a balancing act, though, because you wouldn't want to... It would suck to, like, okay, I'm going to cast a Ponder, and then you hit an Arcane Signet. Great, cool. I probably could have used that Ponder way more than I could have used Arcane Signet in most cases, but what you really want to hit is like, okay, I'm going to cast... I don't know, Gut Shot for 2 life instead of, any mana. And then I'm going to flip into something like an Omniscience. That's kind of the thing you want. And the best part about this, I thought at first it said non-creature, but it just says any non-land card. So you're casting literally anything. So a lot of lists in this, you could run Eldrazi. That's a big one because you're actually casting them. So a lot of decks cheat in Eldrazi different ways besides casting. And so being able to actually get the cast triggers off makes those Eldrazi way better. Like if you're running the old Ulamog and you're just able to, hey, I'm going to destroy, or is it, I think it's destroy 2 target permanents, I believe. That one's a big one. And either Kozilek just for the card draw. You could run... I guess, what are some others? The Nulamog, I forget what he does. He's got a similar ability. Let's see here. Yeah, when you cast a spell, destroy target permanent. And then Old Man, Ceaseless Hunger, exile 2 target permanents. So you get a lot of that kind of stuff. And then, let's see, what is the Emrakul? She does a bunch of crazy crap, and that's part of the reason why she's banned. At least one of them is. Yeah, cast a spell you can control. That's right. The one that's you can still play. You get control of target player's turn, opponent's turn. So that's a big one, being able to flip that off of her. But she can just be built in so many ways. And I really, really like that, even though she's pretty costly, which makes her actually, in a lot of ways, way more casual. Because even if you're flipping something really big, it's not that important. Another thing that kind of limits her is it's only for the first spell that matters. And because you're having to physically have a card with it, you can't copy her trigger. So if you were to have something, she is a wizard, so you could have a Harmonic Prodigy, which would double her triggers. You don't have any choice to cast a card because there is no card. The first trigger resolves, or whatever trigger resolves, I guess the copy would resolve first, and then there is nothing to do with the second card because there is no second card. You either already cast the card that you cast for the first time each turn, or you put it on the bottom of your library. It's one of the two, and then the next time it would resolve, it would just fizzle because there's no actual card for the spell to resolve with. So that kind of bummed me out a little bit because I was like, oh wow, this seems really good, and you could copy it. You could get a Rings of Brighthearth in there. You could do a bunch of cool stuff, but you really can't because you got to have the card, which again I do think balances her because I feel like if you got too much of that out, it would be a little too much. It's also the thing that kind of balances it back is the fact that it's the first spell you cast each turn, so it doesn't have to be your turn. So let's say someone casts something and you just want to cast a counter spell. You don't actually have to counter that spell. You could just straight up put it to the bottom. Or if you want to brainstorm on someone else's turn. And really the big one in here that I always go to as one of the best synergies is Mind's Dilation. Mind's Dilation, if you don't know, is a 7-drop enchantment that says whenever an opponent casts their first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of their library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost, which basically what that does is anytime anyone casts a spell, which is kind of the first spell, but that's all she cares about. Nira also gets to, do her thing each time anyone casts a spell on their turn, which, most Magic players like to do. So basically, once every rotation, you're getting at least 4 Nira triggers, which is pretty dang big. And who knows, you may have even gotten Mind's Dilation off of her trigger anyway. So she's kind of fun. I'm actually halfway thinking about building her as a paper thing to go play because I just absolutely love what she does. And you got a lot of other stuff. You could throw a Grape Shot in there, and that's actually another thing that I just remembered is that because you're flipping into non-land spells, you actually can do a few crazy things. So more than just trying to copy your triggered abilities because she can't actually use the triggered abilities, it doesn't matter. you can actually just flicker her. That's what matters more. So because you're in blue, there's a lot of flicker spells, and that's what she cares about because she sees that as the first spell each turn, which is a lot better than, having to try to copy the trigger. There's a bunch of stuff that is really easy to flicker, and flicker can do a lot more for you. You can run, Conjurer's Closet, which I guess technically isn't the best because you'd have to cast it right there and have to be instant speed, but a lot of other flicker things just so you can get a bunch of value on your turn. But the big one there is actually Displacer Kitten, and that card, man, I need to pick up so many copies of that card. I didn't learn about it recently, but I kind of found how powerful it was recently. And let me read this out for you here. A Displacer Kitten is a 3 colors and 1 blue for a cat beast that's also a 2/2. So kind of a low stat line, but it has a special little thing called Avoidance, which says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So the way this is crazy is that with this and Nira out at the same time, as long as you don't have any other creatures in your deck besides Displacer Kitten, you can infinitely go through your entire deck. And the way that works is basically what you do is you have, you cast any spell. That's how it starts. And then you stack the triggers of Displacer Kitten and Nira for Displacer Kitten to go first. So you flicker Nira, and then the old Nira trigger, which was on the stack, you have Resolve. And as long as you're not hitting a creature on the next spell that you bottom and then reveal, because Nira is technically not the same Nira that saw the first spell, it is only seeing whatever spell you cast right then, because that is technically the first spell she has seen, because she's technically within the rules. If you flicker a creature, whatever creature that is now is considered a new instance of that creature. So it's not technically the same exact creature as it was before. I don't know. It's like a weird cloning philosophy thing. But the way that works is basically every time you do that and you flicker her, Nira's ability resolving actually triggers Nira herself again. So you can do that infinitely, and you can basically put an infinite number of things, and you just play any storm card. Really, you can just go into something like Grape Shot, and actually every time you hit Grape Shot, you do it again. So, or it adds that many copies equal to your storm count. So even if, someone is trying to counter it or whatever, and they could counter any spell you're putting there anyway, but wherever you stop doesn't really matter because you don't actually have to stop. You can just choose to cast whatever the last thing is, and you could have, it doesn't even have to be Grape Shot that you land on or anything like that, because through the act of going through your entire deck, you're going to be hitting an infinite amount of copies of that because it's going to go on the stack and resolve and do all that. So that's kind of a fun, I guess it's more competitive level, because, it's a combo piece. I feel that kind of stuff is very combo, especially because it's one creature. And then the only hard part is you're going to need to run some sort of tutor system, because trying to get Displacer Kitten off of just her trigger is going to be extremely hard. So you can run stuff like the big one everyone always points toward, which is actually a card that I did recently find out about, or I guess I had always heard about, but I finally decided to read, is Polymorph. So Polymorph is a 3 colors and 1 blue for a sorcery that says destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Its controller reveals from the top card of their library until they reveal a creature card. Reveals cards from the top card of their holy crap, I said that wrong. Its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. That player puts that card onto the battlefield, then shuffles all other cards revealed this way into their library. So basically, you cast and play a bunch of spells like Dragon Fodder and stuff that makes creature tokens, and then you go get Polymorph, because the hard part with being an Izzet is that you have like Gamble, and that's about it for trying to get Displacer Kitten itself. You're trying to basically find it without having anything to find it with. So if you're able to play, a Merchant Scroll, Mystic Tutor, Solve the Equation, all of those things. And I guess, what is the new one? There's the old tutor that finally got reprinted. I forget what it's called, or is getting reprinted. It's another blue one. But that one's also extremely good, and they basically all do the same thing. It's just a personal tutor. That's what it is. So it's basically the same thing as, it's the opposite of Merchant Scroll. So Merchant Scroll looks for a blue instant and puts it on top of your library. And Personal Tutor searches for a sorcery. It doesn't have to be blue, but it's a sorcery card, and you put that on top. So either way, that can be extremely good, because you just put Polymorph on top, or before that, if you need some sort of token creator, you put a Dragon Fodder, you put, oh man, I can't even think of any others, any sort of token creator spell that's not technically a creature when it enters. You sacrifice the creature, you go down until you hit your Displacer Kitten because that's the only creature in the deck, and then from there you just literally cast anything else, and then that's it. So I think that's a really fun combo, and I really just like, again, I like the randomness that this brings because you're getting a different game almost every single time. Okay, I might flip into a Kozilek, or I might flip into an Ulamog, and I'm exiling everyone's libraries, I'm casting a whole bunch of stuff, I'm, killing people off and annihilating all of their crap, or I cast an Omniscience, and basically whatever I top deck, I'm immediately going to play and get way more value off of Nira, or maybe something like Mind's Dilation. I'm going to use all of your spells as you cast them, or maybe I'm not going to, and get my own spells, but in any way, you're getting something. There's always value to be gained from it. Even if you get to a lesser spell, it might be a spell that is more versatile than the last one you cast. So if you're going into a Ponder, it's like, okay, whatever, I'm going to bottom this, see if I can get something better, and you get like a Brainstorm. It's pretty equivalent, but at the very least, you're getting something different that actually might suit your needs more. It's just kind of a fun thing, and, a lot of times because you're casting these spells, stuff like Magecraft triggers on each spell that you cast. So you might have like Stormkiln Artisan. So every time you cast that, for each spell you cast, or the first card you cast each time, Nira is actually giving you 2 treasures off that because the cast goes on the stack. It doesn't resolve, but Stormkiln Artisan still sees that card being cast. So there's a lot of fun stuff like that. And I mean, it doesn't have to be Magecraft. Magecraft just also counts for copies. So like a young Pyromancer even, you're going to be getting a bunch of more elementals than you normally would just because of the way her trigger works. So I think she's really fun. I'm really excited to build her. Actually, right now, I have another Izzet deck, and that's one thing is I'm trying to branch out and sort of hit a bunch of different color types. Eventually, I want to have one of each color combination. I already have 2 Woburg decks, but I want one of each monocolor, one of each of the 10 guilds, and then one of each tricolor, and then we'll see about 4 color. What's it? How many variations of that are there? I don't know. I'm bad at math, but maybe get like an Atraxa or something. I don't know. And then figure out the rest of it. But I think it's very fun to try all the different combinations because you are restricted in access and you get new access to a bunch of different things. So my Riel deck is Riel, by the way, is just discard wheel tribal. The first time you discard on your turn, you actually draw that many cards back. So she's kind of a fun one. And she has a lot of the stuff that I already use for Nira. So I don't really want to have to buy a deck and basically have the same cards like my Jeska's Wills and my 1,000-Year Storm and my Ottawaras and that kind of crap. I don't really want to have to rebuy it. Honestly, it's not even about the financial value. I mean, it is sort of having to spend that money on the cards, but the fact that I already have the cards and I'm kind of just not wanting to have to buy more because if at any point I take those apart, some of those cards might actually be as useful as they were. And it's not to say that I won't ever re-put together Riel again, but try out Nira. I think she's going to be the next one I try. And actually, I lied. Nira is not the only odd one out. This next one also is. It is Sakashima and Kodama, which, there's a lot of those, but the only 2 partners are Sakashima of 1,000 Faces and Kodama of the East Tree. So both of these cards by themselves are actually really good, but in unison they go instantly infinite. They are really crazy. So I guess we'll start with Kodama because that's the one we care about most. Kodama of the East Tree is a 4 and 2 green for a spirit that is a 6/6 and has reach, and of course partner. It says whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. So Kodama by itself is a value engine. If you play a 6-drop, you can play a 6-drop or less from your hand for free. If you play lands can also be put on because those are 0 costs, and because it says equal or lesser mana value, basically every land you play technically can be 2 lands. He's awesome for landfall, and the fact that he has partner is kind of broken because you can do stuff like what I've done with this deck. So next up, we have the other partner commander, which is Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. He's 3 colorless and a blue for a human rogue that is a 3/1 that says you may have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces enter the battlefield as a copy of another creature you control, except it has Sakashima of it has Sakashima of 1,000 Faces other ability. Sorry, I was getting it confused with the other one, which says it keeps its name, but has different stuff. And the big part of this, it says the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. So what that means is normally if you have 2 legendary permanents of the exact same name, one of them has to immediately die. You have to sacrifice one of them. That's just how they've ruled the game. So you can't do a lot of crazy stuff. And so Sakashima basically says you get to ignore that, which means he can enter as a copy of Kodama. And what happens here is you will, because he's becoming a copy of Kodama, he also copies his CMC, which is 6. So you would cast normal Kodama of the East Tree, and get his. I guess he doesn't trigger himself. But then what you do is you cast Sakashima of Thousand Faces, and when he enters, you have him enter as a copy of Kodama. So first of all, your original Kodama triggers and says, okay, you can put a 6 CMC or less spell or permanent from your hand onto the battlefield for free. And then Sakashima, who's a copy of Kodama, triggers off of that and says you may put a permanent with CMC 6 or less from the battlefield for free. That was really bad wording, but you know what I mean. So basically, if you're seeing the idea here, is they trigger off of each other, and since technically they are different triggers, you can put all of your permanents with CMC 6 or less onto the battlefield for free. And that's the really broken thing here. If it said just lesser mana cost, this wouldn't be that broken. It'd be like, okay, land is as low as you can go. If you play a 1-drop, you can play a land. Play 6-drop, you can play a 5-drop. But because it says equal, it means that if you can ever get out 2 Kodamas at once, they will infinitely trigger off of each other, meaning you can just do whatever you want. So this does a lot of things. And this is actually one that I need to put an Architect and play with, because I actually just recently started with Architect. I actually use Mana Box on my phone. And it sounds like a bunch of endorsements here, but these are just the things that I use because they're good for organizing. I do have to say Architect, well, I don't think it has a phone or app, but the desktop version is awesome. I think it is really well done. Gives you so many options, just allows you basically to goldfish, play out the deck by yourself and kind of see how it goes. But you can run, because you're in blue for this deck, you can run a bunch of stuff. It doesn't have to be Sakashima that you enter with. Of course, having him is good, but really what matters is you can put stuff like Spark Double in, which, you can make another copy of Kodama. And as long as you have just that, and of course I have the other Sakashima in this deck, which still gets around the legend rule because it's still called Sakashima the Imposter. That's another really good one. And honestly, I don't think I have it in here, but I probably should just in case, is Mirror Box, which also says it's just a colorless spell that says the legend rule doesn't apply. And for each creature with the same name, they get a bunch of +1/+1. They get a big static boost. But that's basically what this deck does. You're just trying to make a copy of Kodama, and then there's a bunch of ways that you can get infinite lands. So you're basically just bouncing lands back to your hand, putting them back down over and over and over again to get infinite mana. I think I put a Cloudstone Curio in here, and that's one of the big ones. I think Cloudstone Curio by itself kind of goes infinite with basically anything. Because it says whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. So basically, I think Cloudstone Curio, you just basically have, if you have 2 lands, you basically play the land, tap it, bounce the other land. Oh no, that doesn't go infinite because you don't get to play infinite lands. I'm kind of stupid. But with Kodama, it does, because you're having infinite triggers. Whenever that land enters, you can put another land down. And since they bounce each other off of Cloudstone Curio, you can have infinite mana extremely easily. And of course, there's a bunch of other ways to bounce stuff. But that is the big combo piece here. And then you have, I think it's this Prime Speaker Zagana, which is a legendary creature that enters with the battlefield with X counters on it, where X is the greatest power among other creatures you control. And it says when it enters the battlefield, you draw cards equal to its power. So this card, because you can infinitely flicker stuff with Kodama, as long as you have, 2 creatures out or whatever, you're able to flicker this or bounce it back to your hand and put it back down and draw out your deck. Skewed Swarm, of course, playing the landfall stuff just because you can. AC, having it in here because it allows you to draw whenever you play stuff. Avenger of Zendikar, you can make infinitely big crap. Gwenna, just because Gwenna is good. And I know all these card names may not make sense if you haven't seen them all. They're not really important. I'm just naming important ones, or I'll tell you what important ones are. If it matters, I'll read them as I have been doing. Like Tireless Tracker is a big one. Land ATB, you investigate, so you can basically draw out your deck because you're getting infinite mana from that. And when you sack a clue, it gets bigger, so you can make it infinitely big. A bunch of crap like that. Just stuff like a bunch of triggers that allow you to win the game. I think it's pretty competitive level. It seems pretty good. Like I said, I haven't even really goldfished it a whole bunch, but it's a kind of a cool one. It's a fun deck to kind of mess around with. And of course, Finale Devastation makes everything +X and gives everything haste. So it's just a really, really big What is the big man? What is the big frog dude? Oh, how did I forget his name? He's like one of the coolest win conditions ever. Actually, I actually have of that card. I can recognize the art. Another life or an extra life. I think it was the extra life secret lair where they had little kids draw it. What is the big man's name? It's so cool. It's just like a little girl. Normally when they draw cards, or when an artist, I guess, is commissioned for a card is the more proper way to say it, they have their name in the lower left to, pay tribute to them, and so people know who the artist is. So for this one, it does the same, but it gives you their age so you can kind of get a general feel for, how old the kid is when they drew this card, so you know kind of what you're looking at. I think even Mark Rosewater did one, which is really funny because it's like, oh, Kira, age 5. Max, age 10, and then it's Mark Rosewater, age like 42 or maybe older. That's why I can't find it. I'm not looking at all my cards. I'm looking at a deck. He's really, really good. He's a fun card. If I can find his name, I feel really weird. Craterhoof Behemoth. Craterhoof. Oh, I didn't realize he was called Behemoth. I've only heard him called Craterhoof. You can tell that I don't play with this card a lot. I have it, but it's not that good. Or it's great. I just haven't played with it a lot. It's a really fun art. I love it. It's so cute. I love the hand drawn stuff. It's so fun to see it. I love that they had actual artists come back and reimagine it as an actual detailed creature. And even like they always have flavor text of whatever the little kid was like, hey, I think he does this or he does that. I think that's super fun. But following with that train of thought, I think Sakushima is really cool. I think that deck is really fun, and I think that both of those having partner is really crazy. Even Sakushima himself having partner is pretty dumb. But the fact that they can go together, and I do have to say right now, and again, this might be another clue in to what the others might be, is that my favorite color combination is Simic. I really love blue and green, and I think they complement each other like amazingly. And so being able to play those colors like that is really fun, and especially playing to both their strengths with green and all their landfall stuff, and then blue and all their counter spells and all their copying. I think it's a really fun deck, and I wish I could speak more on a lot of the cards, but I don't even know what a lot of them do. This is one I really like the way it works, and I like both these cards individually, and so even though I'm saying this is my favorite deck and I don't know what it does, it's more about the commanders. I like them both individually and I play them both in individual decks, and so having them together is a really, really fun idea. Alright, done with that long-winded one. Let's get to the next long-winded one. Tongue twister. We have Jodah the Unifier up on number 2. I haven't been numbering them. We had number 5 for Maria, number 4 for Nira. 3 was the partner pair right there. And then number 2 we have Jodah. So Jodah the Unifier is a broken card and has been ever since it came out. It just goes to show that the set it came out with was Legendary Tribal. It was all about legendaries. So let's see here. If I can get the card to load, we might actually be able to read it. Okay. Jodah the Unifier is one of each color, so white, blue, black, red, green, or WUBRG, for a human wizard that is a 5/5. So 5 for 5. I mean, of course, the color is kind of hard to get, but what really matters is what he actually does. So first, he has a static ability that says legendary creatures you control get +X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. That by itself is already stupidly good. So basically, if you have 4 legendary creatures out, they could be, it could be Rograk or Skrell. They could be really stupidly little stuff. As long as they're legendary, your entire board is getting +4/+4. And Jodah even counts himself. It just says legendary creatures you control. So he comes out actually as a 6/6 technically. And that +4 pump is big by itself. Jodah's a 9/9 immediately, which is already scary. But the biggest part of this is triggered ability, which says whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So I actually, I don't know if I can leave links in here, but if you want to go check it out, you can go check out my Enlightening Tutor channel. I have done a deck review on Jodah because I love him so much. He's such a fun commander, and I kind of go through all the broken parts of him. So that's kind of another, this is more of an addendum to that, but that's another good place to kind of check out the full thing and see all the visuals and what I've done. And this has definitely been updated a lot since then. Some of the big stuff is still there, and even some of the recommendations I've made, I may have been added to the deck already, but I love this commander. So basically, what this does is, let's say you cast a 3 CMC spell. Let's say you cast Gwenna, which is a 3 CMC legendary creature. As long as it's from your hand, you're basically cascading. The only difference in why this doesn't say Legendary Cascade is because you can't keep doing it over and over again. It's only from hand, so it's not technically a cascade. It's whenever you cast something from your hand, you reveal until you hit something. So it doesn't keep going off of itself like the first Sliver would. It's still extremely good, though. So like I was saying earlier with the hypothetical I was going into, with Gwenna, is that, let's say you cast her from your hand. On the cast trigger, you reveal until you hit a true 2-drop Legendary or less. So let's say you hit like a Skrelv or maybe a Mox Amber, because that's also legendary. You hit something like that, or a Black Red Reforged, any sort of legendary permanent with 2 or less. You put that onto the battlefield for free as well. So that by itself is stupidly crazy with Jodah out. So just casting that spell, not only for free did you get a Skrelv, let's say, but because those are both creatures, they are pumping each other because of Jodah's ability. So they all enter as +3/+3 to whatever they are because of Jodah's abilities. So this basically is a combination of both the First Sliver and Sliver Legion, which both have the individual abilities of what Jodah can do, but they're together, and honestly better than Slivers, it's legendary. They don't have to be of a tribe specifically, they just have to be legendary creatures, which legendary creatures are known for being pretty dang good. So with this, it is actually a lot different from Nero, like I mentioned before, because you can copy this trigger. There's nothing you have to do as a prerequisite to cascade. It's just when you cast a spell, cascade. So you can do any number of things. You can have Harmonic Prodigy, of course, is one of the best ones because he still is a wizard, so you get that extra trigger. You can run Psionic Resonator, Rings of Brighthearth, any of the good stuff, and get a bunch of extra triggers. And this is actually the place that I put my Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, because if you have multiple Jodahs out, both their abilities double. So if you have 3 creatures out, they all have +6/+6 now, and whenever you cast from hand, you actually double cascade. And so you can get a lot of stuff. Like one of the recent ones I put in here was the new Atali, the Atali Primal Conqueror. That is the ETB. When it enters the battlefield, everyone exiles the top card of their library until they hit a non-land, you cast all of them for free. So with Atali entering, before he enters, you actually cascade into a 6-drop or less. That enters the battlefield, then Atali enters, and then he triggers. So you can do insane stuff with this deck. It is really stupid, and there's actually a lot of ways to go infinite with it. There's a lot. One of them being with Atali. I have Emiel the Blessed, which basically says, pay 3 mana, flicker a creature. And I also run Prosper, since you're casting from exile. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, or play a card from exile, lands count, because Prosper's just that good, you get a treasure token. So with Atali, Emiel, and Prosper out, it goes infinite. You basically are going to cast every single spell in everyone's deck and exile all their lands. Because what you do, you pay 3 to flicker with Emiel. As long as they're playing non-land cards in their deck, you get to cast those. So you cast all 4 of them, or maybe you don't, maybe you get a few counter spells, as long as you're netting at least 3 mana off of at least you're getting at least 3 cards. You cast those Prosper triggers 3 times, you refill your mana to do it again. That stacks. If you get 4 and you only need 3, you actually have an extra mana for the next time and the next time. And I run a whole bunch of stuff, and I run very few counter spells, so my deck would almost always make it. And of course, everyone is seeing Atali and being like, oh my god, it's so good. But that by itself is an amazing thing to do. And of course, I run stuff like Aurelia, the War Leader, to get some extra combats. And actually, funnily enough, I run Esika and not the Prismatic Bridge. I run Esika for Esika. Sometimes I'll cast the Bridge because, of course, it's just a good spell. And especially because its Cascade is higher. You're getting a 4 CMC instead of a 2 CMC, which actually, fun fact, this deck does not run anything lower than 3. It's mostly 4 drops and then 3 drops as well. Those are the 2 big ones. Apparently a lot of 4-drop legendary creatures are just that good. But that's really fun. There's a lot of fun stuff with that. But having Esika allowing you to tap all of your legendaries for mana is really good. I run a bunch that allow them to tap for mana. So when you cascade, you can tap them immediately, get more stuff out of them, and it just kind of keeps going on and on and on. So this is a really fun deck, and one of the best parts about this, again, it's the randomness. I love being able to see, okay, I cast my Jegantha just because it's good. Let's see what I'm going to hit. Am I going to hit something like a Shanid, which is going to, give me better stuff off of my legendary casts. Am I going to get an Audric, which is going to give all of my stuff, all of the keywords that they already have. It just makes them widespread. Am I going to get Red Drabic so that whenever my stuff would die, I get them back? There's any number of things that make this really good. It's just so fun to see what you're going to get, and I really like the random aspect of it, and it's just got so much support. That's the thing, is I think Legendary Tribal probably has more support than any other tribe. I would still consider it a tribe, even though it's technically not a creature type. It is a super type, I believe, so it is still technically a type that a creature has. And I find that extremely fun. Even with Planeswalkers, that's another thing. It's a legendary spell. It doesn't have to be a creature that you either cascade with or cascade into. And the fact that you do have to be legendary means that you actually can't miss. So normally it's like, okay, I'm going to, cast this really, like an Omniscience, let's say. I'm casting that, and let's say my first spell each turn has Cascade. I Cascade, let's say hit a counter spell. Okay, that just sucks for me. I can't cast the counter spell, or maybe I could technically counter my own thing, but I'm not going to. It fizzles, I get nothing off of it besides, the Omniscience, which is a good card, but the Cascade isn't doing you any good. With this, as long as you're running, non-bad, legendary creatures, you're gonna hit something that you want. You're not going to hit your 3 visits, or you're not going to hit your Soul Ring, even if you may want to. You're just hitting your legendary spells, which is amazing. I really like the deck. I really like all the stuff that provides, and of course, I'm a sucker for Woober good stuff, which that's all this is. You just get a bunch of really good crap, and you have access to all the colors you need to be able to do a bunch of cool stuff. I love the deck. I'm constantly looking at upgrading different things and changing it around, because I think it's just so fun, all of the crap it does. It's so cool to see all of the different, things that it can do. It goes in so many different directions, and a lot of times it can be monotonous, because I run stuff like Sisay, the Sisay where you pay Woober, you put a legendary permanent from library to battlefield. That can get a little monotonous at times, but the way you get there, the journey is always different. The destination a lot of times is the same. It's usually overrun, or I draw myself out or something, but the way you get there is different. You get to have a different experience playing the deck, and you get to that penultimate moment of, okay, I win, or I'm going to swing at you, I'm going to deal all the damage. It's just fun. I really like the basic premise of Magic of, hey, I'm just going to hit you with something really big, you're going to die awfully. I really like that. I think the design philosophy is why it's stuck around so long. Of course, you have the other win conditions, but I think it's just such a fun thing to hit people with big stuff. Like, here's my Avacyn, it's gonna swing at you. You can't kill it unless you exile it. I'm gonna give it protection from everything. Die. I just think it's so cool that this deck can do that so easily, and there's so many ways that legendaries can be exploited. That's another big part of me, about the stuff that I like about Magic, is the fact that you can exploit stuff so easily. I like the random nature of stuff, and I also like the fact that things can break very easily. I mean, you even look at something like Basalt Monolith. That card, because it taps for 3 colorless and untaps for 3 colorless, means it goes infinite. You can play literally anything. Like, one that I actually kind of want to look at is, let's say you're playing a Sir Conrad deck, which is a black deck. Whenever creatures enter the battlefield or leave battlefield, or enter graveyard, leave graveyard, whatever, you deal damage to each opponent. All you have to do is run Basalt Monolith and Mesmeric Orb. Both of those cards, Basalt Monolith can tap and untap itself infinitely, because it just can pay for its own, abilities. And with Mesmeric Orb, whenever you untap a permanent, you mill a card. So all you have to do is play those 2 cards out, and then run a Shuffle Titan. Something that allows, when it hits the graveyard, it triggers to shuffle itself and everything else back into the library. Because what that basically does is you're milling yourself out, you're going to hit the Shuffle Titan at some point, and then when you do, it all gets shuffled back in. And so you're not only putting everything in the graveyard, it's triggering that many times for the creatures entering, it's also leaving the graveyard that many times, so you're getting that many triggers again. I think it is such a fun idea, and it's honestly something I've also looked at. I really like Mono Black. I actually got the Warhammer precon for that. I forget what the actual face commander is. I run Onrak here, because I think her ability is way more fun. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't play a lot of Warhammer. I'm trying to, but that is a really fun, and I like her attack triggers. I think it's fun. But Sir Conrad is also, actually, I think one of the first decks I tried making with Sir Conrad, because I was like, wow, this seems really good. And it turns out he's a really good commander. But that's another one I might look at checking out. Just making you could make the deck extremely budget friendly with that, especially if that's the win condition. to just mill everyone out. Black can make so much mana that so fast. And it's got the reanimation of it and the tutor, and you could do it so cool. But Sir Karnon's on this list. He's cool, but he's not Jodah, which is the entire point. I love Jodah. I love what he can do. I love that he has so much support, and he always gets more support because Commander is the only format anymore. It's the only thing people play Magic is Commander at this point. I mean, I say that sort of ironically, but also sort of unironically because that's kind of what it's turned into, which, you know, I'm not going to go into that whole spiel right now because that's a whole other it feels almost political in a way. Just the politics of Magic, I guess. But that's kind of the fun thing is you always have support for Jodah. He can always do anything. He can do pretty much anything you want him to do. And he just has a very large array of things. And more than anything else, and that's another big part of this list, is all of these decks are strong by themselves. It doesn't really matter what you put in them. They can basically go off no matter what. Seeing stuff like Maria a little less so, and even Nira doesn't go off as much, but, you know, with Sakashima and Kodama, that's basically because you have an infinite combo in the command zone, that goes off. Jodah, it doesn't really matter what legendaries you put in, because you're cascading into them and then they pump each other, you could run the most garbage thing ever, and that thing is still going to be like a 12-12 at the end of it. It's still going to be big, it's still going to be good, and Jodah just goes off so fast. He's just that good. He's just amazing. There's too much value, and that's another part of it. I like randomness in my cards. I like being able to break them, and I like when they provide a lot of value by themselves. And so something that embodies all three of those to pretty much the max is going to be my number one pick, which is Kinnan Bonner Prodigy. So this card probably rings a bell, maybe a good one or a bad one. Those might be sirens, not bells for a lot of people. Kinnan is an extremely good commander and is actually one of the top competitive commanders, which I didn't really think about. Funnily enough, big fun fact, and a big reason why he might be biased towards being in the top is the fact that he was my first ever commander, which is kind of funny. A lot of people look shocked when I told them that because it's like, holy crap, you picked something really powerful. But I actually just opened a box of Ikoria. I was like, oh, hey, this guy seems really cool. I like these colors. I think it's kind of fun. And I actually got into it over COVID. So I was basically just goldfishing and trying stuff out. And I was like, cool, I'm going to settle on him and try him out. I like putting out big creatures, and I like that he provides so much value. So let me get into this card itself because it's pretty broken. So Kinnan Bonner Prodigy is a 2/2 for a green and a blue. He's a human druid, and he says whenever you tap a non-land permanent 4 mana, add 1 mana of any type that permanent produced. Which basically means if you tap your Soul Ring for mana and Kinnan is out, he actually adds an extra colorless. If you tap your Birds of Paradise, it adds 2 mana, which actually makes the bird positive, which is kind of crazy. Your Mana Crypt now taps for 3 mana. It's a 0 for 3. If you could somehow get a Black Lotus in the game, it would tap for 4. It's a Blacker Lotus instantly. It's crazy. This commander, by just that alone, if you downshifted him to like a rare or even an uncommon at that, with just that ability, it would be broken. There's so much you can do, and the big part of it being broken is the card I said earlier with the Rings of Brighthearth, the one that goes infinite by itself, Basalt Monolith. That card with Kinnan goes infinite, which is insane. The 2-card combo, it's 5 mana for infinite mana, because whenever Basalt Monolith taps itself, Kinnan adds an extra mana of what it produced because it's an online permanent. You are tapping it for 4 mana, untapping it for 3, which means every time you do that, you're netting an extra mana. So it gives you infinite colorless. So, of course, the easiest way to go with this, and the way I kind of went with this, not as much anymore because I made it more competitive level, is, of course, big, bad Eldrazi. You know, your all of your crap, since you have infinite colorless mana, cast your Kozileks, cast your Emrakuls, cast your Ulamongs, anything big. Just cast it all. Cast your X spells for infinite. You know, you can do a bunch of cool stuff like that. And actually, the main win card in this deck right now is actually Walking Ballista. Because that card, if you don't counter it, it's really hard to get around because it's targeted, you know, pinging at you a bunch. Ping all your stuff, ping everything. All the colorless stuff that allows you, hey, you got any colorless mana? Cool, you can go infinite. We have Dramatic Reversal. I already did an entire, and that's another thing. This is the other commander that I've already done a video on, a review of, a deck review of on Enlightening Tutor you can go check out. I've already done that, but that's, you know, just more shilling of me because, of course, here's a cool thing I've done. It actually I really did enjoy that, and that deck is so far removed from what I've done now. That deck is kind of crazy, actually. It has changed significantly. It is basically an entirely different deck. there are very few cards, like even the basic lands I've changed. I've made them the Unfinity, either planetary or full arts, because I just like them that much. And it is by far and away my most expensive deck because I've thrown so much into it. It's just my favorite commander. He's my baby boy. I don't think I'm ever going to take him apart, even though I can't play him on most pods because he just goes way too fast. He is still kind of my pride and joy. He kind of marks what I would say, not only my first commander deck, but what I find is the pinnacle for me for Magic. He fits every single part of it that I enjoy. He has the breakability there. He has the randomness with actually his second ability. I didn't go into that. Let me talk about that. I went on a tangent, which is probably going to happen a lot. Just be prepared for that with this podcast. His second ability costs 5 colors, colorless, a green and a blue, and says, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a non-human creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That is the other half of this that makes it super broken. So let's say you do have that Basalt Monolith combo. You can basically pay Simic and get something stupid. You could get an Emrakul off of, you'd already have infinite mana, but even if you don't have that, 7 mana you can hit anything. And it's not like a Joda or anything where it's literally, okay, I'm just, whatever the first thing I have to pick. You're getting 5 cards. And this deck right now, including the Kinnan, runs 32 cards. So a third of the deck is creature cards. So you're going to be hitting something most of the time. Out of 5 cards, you're more than likely going to hit something. Yeah, you might hit something stupid like a Llanowar Elves, but again, you could also hit like a Vorinclex. You could hit something stupid. And another part of this is you don't actually have to hit anything. You can fail to find whatever you're looking for. If you hit a Thassa's Oracle too early, which of course is in this deck, you don't actually have to cast it. You don't have to waste it. You can be like, nope, I didn't find anything, and continue onward. And of course, the big synergy here is the fact that not only does he allow your stuff to tap for more, you can immediately funnel that into himself. And those creatures you get may also funnel into him again and keep going. Like I run Nyxbloom Ancient, you get that out. It's basically game for the most part. And there's a bunch of stuff that just makes this stupid. Like with the infinite mana, you have Thrasios, Triton Hero, which basically says pay 4 colorless mana, scry 1, then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put on the battlefield tapped, otherwise draw 1. So basically what this allows you to do is selectively draw your entire deck, put all your lands onto the battlefield, which may or may not matter, and then, you have whatever you need. And the best part about this is this guy can be hit off of Kinnan. So you might, be going through, you might have your Basalt Monolith out, but you don't have infinite mana yet, infinite colored mana, so you can't do Kinnan an infinite number of times, but you managed to hit Thrasios. Cool. That wins you the game. And then what's very similar to that is actually, I think, one of the least expensive card in this, or least expensive creature in this entire deck. It's Prophet of Distortion. It's a little Eldrazi dude that says pay 3 colorless, or 3 generic, I should say, because of this card. Generic is literally anything. And then 1 colorless. The colorless has to be colorless. It's a little diamond. So you have to pay specifically colorless mana, but then you draw a card for the 4, which is pretty bad normally. You don't want that, but with infinite mana, you're drawing your deck. So it's kind of like a Thrasios in itself, and of course, it's not a human, so it's another way to draw out your deck. Again, I could go into any number of ways this is going to go infinite. There are so many. I guess I'll name off a few just to kind of get through it. I'm not going to go through exactly what they all do, but of course, we have Dramatic Reversal, Isochron Scepter. We have the really good enchantments that, make it so your creatures can tap infinitely for mana in Peven's Aura and Freed from the Real. We have, just Nyxbloom Ancient and Basalt Monolith go infinite with each other because it's tapping for triple. We have a bunch of other big stuff. We have Biomonster's Familiar, which reduces his cost. We have, Bloom Tundra by itself. Like I said, Walking Ballista is a big one. Just any number of ways to go infinite. Thassa's Oracle is kind of the uncounterable one, because unless you can... you have a Torpor Orb, which makes it so he doesn't get any enter the battlefield triggers. You can't actually counter him because of Kinnan. And that's another big part with Kinnan, is that because he does not cast these creatures, it's put into play. They just have to happen. That's actually part of the downside, what I was talking about with Nira earlier. When you're cheating in, let's say you pay the mana, you get the Kozilek, you don't actually get his cast trigger, which kind of sucks. No Eldrazi really haven't entered the battlefield trigger. They're all cast triggers because, Wizards wanted to keep people honest. And that's why some of them are Shuffle Titans. So you couldn't put him to graveyard, reanimate it, cool, I'm losing a level in life, but I'm swinging at you and basically getting rid of all your crap. They want to keep you honest with trying to cast these things, so a lot of, what they do and a lot of their value is tied up in their draw. But even then, you can still get these big creatures in the field. Even if you got a, Kozilek Butcher of Truth on the battlefield, that's a 12/12 with Annihilator 4. That thing is scary. And if it ever dies or goes away and isn't exiled, it's just going to come right back. And then, of course, other crap like Consecrated Sphinx, just for pure value, is going to do big. Staxy pieces, I guess not really stacks, they're hate bears. You got Progress Tyrant, Jin-Gitaxias, which counters everyone's stuff. You've got the other Kozilek, which you can discard cards and counter stuff. You've got Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger in here. You have Void Winnowers, or they just can't cast stuff. You have Coma, so you can just tap down their crap. You have the original Jin-Gitaxias, the Core Augur, to make them discard their hands. You have any number of things. This deck has so many ways to go infinite and goes so fast. I think, honestly, right now, there's only 5 cards you need out of a hand to win. And it goes very, very fast. It's here's some mana, some 0-drops, and then Basalt Monolith, Walking Ballista. That's pretty much it. This deck is insanely good, and honestly, it's kind of over the top. There are things I could put into it still. It's getting kind of up there. Like the few things I can put into here right now is like a Finale of Devastation, a Force of Will, and then like, outside of like Swan Song and Flusterstorm and a bunch of counterspells, I already have like Fierce Guardianship and Pact of Negation, the 2 big ones. There's also a Mental Misstep. But besides those and like a Mana Drain in the counterspell area, there's not much left to put in this deck. I'd have to dip into like the reserve list to go for like a Mox Diamond. Like I even have a Mana Crypt in here. Like that's by far the most expensive card in the deck. But it's like the ceiling has basically been hit. There's not much left to put in this deck. And honestly, it's not even so much I wanted it to be as powerful as possible to trample over everyone. But like I said before, it's more of a testament to my, abilities and my growth as a Magic player. If you look at the video that I did at Enlightening Tutor, you can see that this deck is far and away different, even from what I've said right now. You can look at that and be like, oh, okay, I see the differences. Like, I used to run a lot of different crap. I used to run any big creature that I could find that was in my collection, like a Colossal Dreadmaw, I'd probably put in here. It's a meme, but I would have actually unironically put it in there just because I'm like, hey, here's a big thing. Yeah, I have to pay 7 mana for it, but I got a free creature that can't be countered, and it's just here now. I might hit something small, I might hit something big. I think I had a Tyrannoth Rex, the big 13/13. Anything I could really get my hands on. Here's a big creature. Here's some card advantage. Go wild. That was the kind of crap that I wanted. That was what I found fun about it, and I still do. I still think it's really fun. I still try to keep as many big creatures in there as possible. There's some I've had to take out just because they didn't do as much as I wanted. Like I had an It That Betrays in there, which is a really good card, but the fact that it doesn't actually do anything by itself unless you're attacking, which this deck sideboard, it does have a Concordant Crossroads, but there's no real haste not inhibitors, enablers, besides that in green or blue. So there's not a lot of point in that. It's just kind of a big target that doesn't do a whole lot, and I'm wasting, some of that card advantage on trying to get that. It's more about just getting what I want. So having all the Coma and the Vorinclex, all of this stuff that actually, the big creatures that help me immediately, I still have in there. And it's a really fun deck. I have a great time playing it when I do get to those rare times that I do. A lot of people that have played it are like, wow, this is great. And they actually are pretty, even for its level, they really enjoy it. I think, honestly, Kinnan is just he's a really fun, he's way broken. I think he is way too pushed. Like his ability needs to be different. I don't even know how it would change him, because it would basically be changing his entire dynamic. He'd be a new card, but he is a little broken. Simic Good Stuff has gotten a little too out of hand lately. But that one, Ikoria in general was kind of broken, but that one specifically was way over the top. That was definitely, I wouldn't say the best choice for Wizards of the Coast, but they printed a bunch of crap. They know. And it's not like he's warping competitive. I think he might be top 10. It depends on who you ask. I don't think there's any like official stuff about competitive. Like CDH isn't an official thing. It's just kind of a subset of Commander. A lot of people play it. It's a smaller subset of people, because the whole point of Commander is the casual nature. So it's kind of an idiomic it's redundant is what I'm trying to say. It's an oxymoronic, I guess. There it is. There, I found my words that I wanted. It's oxymoronic because, it's casual competitive game, but he's just fun. I think he's extremely fun. He fits everything I like, and like I said earlier, the secret theme of all this is I like random chance. I like the fact that most of these commanders, I think actually all of them, besides probably Sakushima Kodama, that one's a little, I would have to say, drier than most, is the fact that you're getting some sort of random chance. You're rolling the dice to see what you do, because that's the one thing I don't like about playing competitive, at least with most people, is the game's really dry. At least this may not be true for everyone, but the games that I've played and where I've played at, they can be really dry. There's not as much like commotion as I would like. Like I said earlier, I'm all about the banter, and so having that sort of ability to talk to people and have it be more fun and casual. It's kind of the nature. I just like the air of that more. I like being able to talk to people, and competitive a lot of times can get more stale and more I win the game, which, like I said, I still like high power. I don't think it's the power level. It's just the sort of connotation that has. I would love to be able to just, have that silly banter and like, oh, I'm going to play all these crazy crap and, win instantly. That's cool or whatever. But I like having that atmosphere. I like having everyone, kind of talking with each other, and I think Kinnan is the perfect balance of that. I just can't say perfect balance, but for me, and the ideology I have is he is enough of competitive and he has enough behind him that he can basically do whatever he wants anyway, but adding that random element makes it so each game isn't the exact same. Like with Joda, you're getting there in a different way, and even more so, that line of thinking is way more extreme with Kinnan, because you're basically doing the exact same. That's what you're trying to do. You're either winning through Walking Ballista or Fast as Oracle. Those are the instant wins for the deck. You're killing everyone through one thing, or you're winning by a win condition. That's how it's going down. But you're getting it there a different way. You're playing different mana dorks, you're getting different card advantage, either the Heuristic Study, Sylvan Library, Mystic Remora, whatever, Consecrated Sphinx. You're getting your stuff in different ways. You're playing the game differently, and you're getting it that different experience, which keeps it from being too monotonous. I really like how he is, and it's kind of hard to express that feeling, because I feel like he's like an old friend that I've been with for such a long time, and have gone through so much of my recent life with, especially my Magic life with, kind of having them here at my side with all the the ugly, Magic stuff that I've been through, the good interactions, the bad interactions, the awkward interactions. He's always kind of been in my bag next to my side, always ready to play. And that sounds a little cringy, I know, but it's just, I got that sort of sentimental value, and that's how I feel like it can be best expressed, is he's that kind of, the deck that I've always had, and then it will always be with me while I go play these games. He embodies what I love about Magic and, my style as a player of Magic. So that was very long-winded, which, I'm surprised I even managed to get past 30 minutes, and this has actually gotten pretty long. I don't think I'm going to edit any of this. I didn't screw up too badly, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. What the frick did I call this again? Tap into Magic. That's it. And there you go. So this was Tap into Magic. I really hope you guys have enjoyed. And again, I will show my other channel, or I guess my main channel, the Enlightening Tutor. You can go ahead to at Enlightening Tutor, I believe. I don't think there's a the there for the at. So youtube.com/ at Enlightening Tutor, I think is how that goes. I don't remember exactly, but just go there, look up Enlightening Tutor. There may or may not be a lot there right now. But go check that out. Go see what there is to see. If you like it, maybe subscribe. Maybe check it out. Maybe leave a like, leave a comment. I love to hear feedback, even on these type of things. I don't know if you can do that with Spotify or wherever you're listening this to. I don't know if you can leave comments, but if you can, I'll probably read them at some point. I love hearing from you guys and being able to respond. I think it's really fun. Ooh, of course, got to bump the mic right at the end when I'm trying to talk about important stuff. But yeah, I do hope you guys have enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next episode, podcast, whatever.